For 40 years, the neighbors called her crazy. They whispered behind her back, laughed at her worn-out hands, and shook their heads as she walked past their homes every single morning before sunrise. They watched her dig through garbage bins, collect what others had thrown away, and drag it all back to her small house on the edge of their village in rural Maharashtra. Her name was Lakshmi Devi, and to everyone around her, she was nothing more than the old trash woman, the woman who had lost her mind, the woman who chose garbage over dignity. But on the morning of her 75th birthday, when the village council finally forced open her garage door, what they found inside didn't just silence the mockery, it changed everything they thought they knew about worth, purpose, and what it truly means to build a legacy. This is her story, and I promise you, by the end of it, you'll never look at your own life the same way again. Lakshmi Devi wasn't always the woman the village mocked. In 1972, she was just like everyone else, a young mother of two, married to a kind man who worked as a school teacher in the neighboring town. They didn't have much, but they had enough: a small concrete house, food on the table, dreams of sending their children to college someday. But life, as it often does, had different plans. When Lakshmi was 35, her husband fell ill. The doctors in the city said it was his heart. They gave him medicines that cost more than a month's salary. For 2 years, she watched the man she loved grow weaker, while their savings disappeared, rupee by rupee, into the hands of doctors and pharmacies. When he finally passed away, Lakshmi was left with 2 teenage children, a mortgage she couldn't pay, and a hole in her chest that felt like it would never heal. The village expected her to do what widows often did back then: move in with relatives, depend on the charity of others, shrink into the background of life, and wait for her own end. But Lakshmi had made a promise to her husband on his deathbed. She had held his trembling hand and sworn that she would give their children the education he had always dreamed of, that she would make something of the life they had started together. So instead of giving up, she did something the village had never seen before. She started collecting trash.
At first, people thought it was temporary. Grief makes people do strange things, they said. She'll come to her senses soon. But weeks turned into months, and months turned into years, and Lakshmi never stopped. Every morning at 4:30, before the sun could expose her to the full weight of judgmental stares, she would walk through the village with a large cloth bag slung over her shoulder. She collected bottles, newspapers, metal scraps, plastic containers, anything that others had discarded as worthless. The rag pickers in the city did this for survival, people whispered. But Lakshmi? She had options. She could remarry. She could ask for help. Why was she choosing this humiliation? The children at school started calling her sons the garbage boys. Shopkeepers would hide their trash bins when they saw her coming, embarrassed to be associated with her work. Even the other women, the ones she had once shared chai and stories with, stopped inviting her to their homes. Have some shame, they told her. Think of your children's reputation. But Lakshmi had learned something that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. She had learned that survival requires you to let go of what others think, that dignity isn't about what you do, but why you do it. So she smiled politely at their comments, nodded at their advice, and went back to her work before dawn the next morning. Her children watched all of this. They saw their mother's hands crack and bleed from sorting through refuse. They heard the whispers at school. They felt the weight of being different, of being less than, of being the kids whose mother collected garbage. But they also saw something else. They saw a woman who never complained, who never asked for pity, who worked harder than anyone they had ever known, all so they could have a chance at a better life. Years passed. Lakshmi's sons grew up, and true to her promise, both of them made it to college. The elder studied engineering. The younger became a teacher, just like his father. People in the village were surprised. How could the trash woman afford college fees? Where was the money coming from? What they didn't know was that Lakshmi had turned her garage into something extraordinary. She hadn't just been collecting trash randomly. She had been studying it, learning which materials were valuable, which could be repaired and resold, which could be transformed into something useful. Plastic bottles became raw material she sold to recycling plants. Old newspapers were bundled and sold by the kilo. Broken electronics were carefully taken apart, the copper and circuits sold to scrap dealers in the city. Glass bottles were cleaned and resold to local businesses. But she didn't stop there. Lakshmi started fixing things. A broken radio someone had thrown away would sit on her workbench for weeks until she figured out how to make it work again. Old bicycles were repaired and sold to families who couldn't afford new ones. Torn clothes were stitched and donated to children who needed them. Her garage became a workshop, a recycling center, a repair shop, and a storage facility all at once, and every single rupee she made went into a metal box she kept hidden beneath a loose floorboard.
College fees, books, hostel deposits, emergency funds. She wore the same 3 faded saris for decades. She ate simple dal and rice while her sons had nutritious meals. She never bought herself anything new, never took a day off, never stopped working. The village saw a crazy old woman collecting trash. What they didn't see was a mother building an empire of hope, one discarded item at a time. The old woman's sons both found good jobs after college. They sent money home, begged her to stop working, promised to take care of her. But she refused. "I'm not done yet," she would tell them on their phone calls. "There's still work to do." The neighbors thought she was being stubborn, foolish even. Her sons were successful now. Why was she still digging through trash at 70 years old? Then, on the morning of her 75th birthday, Lakshmi didn't come out of her house. The neighbors noticed because for 40 years, they had set their clocks by her routine. If Lakshmi wasn't out collecting by dawn, something was wrong. When her sons arrived from the city that afternoon, they found her resting in bed, weak but smiling. "Open the garage," she told them. "It's time." The village council, curious and concerned, gathered as her sons unlocked the heavy garage door. Some came out of genuine worry. Others came hoping to finally see what the crazy old woman had been hoarding all these years. What they found took their breath away. The garage wasn't full of trash. It was full of treasures. Not gold or jewels, but something far more valuable. Meticulously organized shelves lined the walls, filled with repaired appliances, refurbished furniture, and sorted recyclable materials worth lakhs of rupees. In the corner sat 23 large containers, each labeled with a name. Names of students from poor families in the village. Inside each container was money, scholarship funds that Lakshmi had been secretly building for years. Money meant to send these children to college, just like she had sent her own sons. But that wasn't all. On a small desk in the center of the garage sat 40 notebooks, 40 years of careful records. Every item she had collected, every rupee she had earned, every family she had quietly helped when they faced medical emergencies or wedding expenses or funeral costs. The same people who had mocked her for 40 years were standing in that garage, reading their own names in her notebooks, realizing that the woman they called crazy had been the one keeping their community afloat all along. Lakshmi Devi passed away peacefully 3 months later, surrounded by her sons and, for the first time in 40 years, the respect of her entire village. At her funeral, 23 students who had received her scholarships stood together, wearing their college uniforms.
Dozens of families shared stories of how she had helped them in secret, never asking for recognition or gratitude. The village that mocked her built a community center in her name. They called it Lakshmi's Legacy, and in the entrance they hung a large photograph of her, smiling in one of her faded saris, a cloth bag over her shoulder. Underneath, they inscribed the words she had once told a young neighbor who asked why she never defended herself against the mockery. "Let them laugh at what I collect. I'm not building a reputation, I'm building a future."